Welcome, welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to Belly Up Fantasy Live. As you can see, we have two very esteemed guests on today. Of course, we've got Chase Vernon down below, as you can see, Bob pointing, and Bob Lung. Thank you guys so much for joining. Let's get into some things here. The Fantasy Football Expo coming up here in a few months.
It
That's
is?
really exciting. Yes. Yeah.
Holy
Right.
cow.
What, two?
Doesn't feel like
A little under two, right?
Yeah, 8 weeks. I think Brian Drake posted the other day, it was like 8 weeks away. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my brain's going to explode.
Yeah. Coming up quick. So I believe all four of us will be in attendance. Obviously, I know, Bob, you will.
Maybe, we'll see.
You might show up.
Yeah,
Maybe.
so tell us a little bit about it, why it's so awesome. Everyone from the community kind of getting it together. This will be my first year. I'm already sold on going, but eager to learn from the man himself a little bit more about it.
Well, it all started back in 2019 when it goes back farther, but I've lived in Canton, Ohio my entire life, which is going on 59 years. And growing up at the Hall of Fame, being right in my backyard, watching the whole Hall of Fame weekend go from a little 2-day event to a 5-day extravaganza with concerts and 20,000 people in the stadium for enshrinement, and it's just I watched it become this amazing thing. And but in my mind, as I became more and more deeper into the fantasy football community, I always felt like we're really wasting the opportunity of not having the fantasy football community come there and enjoy the town, the kind of quietness, uniqueness of it. It's a pretty small town outside of Hall of Fame weekend, and now fantasy football weekend, Expo weekend. It's a very quiet 100,000 people town. I mean, it's everybody knows everybody kind of thing. But in my mind, I always felt like this was the place to have it. And I started the Kings Classic in 2018, which brought the best of the best to Canton to draft at the Pro Football Hall of Fame live on SiriusXM. And then once I had those guys committed to that, and they liked the idea of doing it and coming every year, I said, well, why don't we just add an expo the next day? Let's throw a party. Let's make this into, they call Hall of Fame weekend football's greatest weekend. And now we're going to call this fantasy football's greatest weekend. And it just blew up. I mean, 2019 was the first year I had it. We had like 75 people. I was happy that we got that many. I thought it was cool. 2020, of course, didn't exist in anybody's life. So we go to 2021, and it just kept growing and growing and growing. And, a combination of people cooped up for a year and a half and vaccinations being around to kind of help us feel better about being together. And boom, we had 500 people show up. This year, we're hoping for more. We'll see how that goes. Cost of travel is causing a little bit of problems with some people. And I get it. But, we hope it'll be bigger. We assume it'll be bigger and better, between 500 and 1,000. We'll see how it all ends up down the road. They're starting to pick up again. But it was really just about bringing my two favorite communities together, Canton, Ohio, and the fantasy football community. And it went off even better than I could imagine. And Chase, you were there last year, correct?
Yeah, it was sick. It was so much fun.
So
I got a lot of
turn it
trouble.
over to Chase because I'm biased, right? I enjoyed it. I thought it was great, and I'm still in awe that many people came, and 70% of them came from out of state. I think that's the most amazing thing. It's like it wasn't like a bunch of people from Northeast Ohio. It was people from all over. We had people from Hawaii. We had people from Mexico. This year we got some people coming over from Ireland. We've got Canada couldn't even make it last year. Nobody from Canada made it except for
they had the border shut
Matt Donnelly. This year Canada's open, so now they're going to get to come down. So it's just blown into something amazing. So I'm going to turn it over to Chase because I want the non-biased. I'm putting it on. Of course, It's fantastic. But Chase, why don't you tell me what you thought from the outsider looking in? What you felt was so good and unique about it.
And by the way, Matt Donnelly came out. It took him a minute to get out here, and I think he had a pain in the ass going home as well, trying to get home. And so he went through it all, and he's like, I'm still going to do it. Like, I'm still down, man. It was that much fun. It really was like that much fun. Everything that you put together, Bob, from the hotels and everything that we did, like through the events, and I mean the what are they called, where the people go up and they have the conversations in front of everybody.
Oh, the panel
The
discussions.
panels. Thank you very much. So yeah, the panel discussions were excellent. Like you had some of the best in the industry come through and actually speak onto, what everybody kind of wants to hear and that you see on Twitter, but a lot of things get passed over. And when you hear it in person, certain things start to click that you never even realized before. So it's a whole different animal. And then when you get to have the conversations with some of the experts and whatnot, it just creates a whole, different feeling, about fantasy football and almost like a sense of confidence to an extent, because you did actually learn some stuff that you can apply. But it's awesome if you're also trying to get into the industry, right? And you're trying to learn how to write, you're trying to learn how to podcast, you're trying to do different things, because you can actually ask those questions that not many people have answers to. And I mean, dude, because of the Expo, that's why I'm working and have a full-time job in the industry now, is because I linked up with Matt Walsh over there with TrophySmack, and he gave me an opportunity to do this full time. Like I would have never had this chance. Like we ended up running into each other. We had a great time. We connected, and because of the Expo, I now have full time in this industry, and I don't have to bartend anymore. So it's a whole different animal. I was bartending for 10 years, just to give you a heads up. It's something that I love doing, but I love fantasy football a little more.
Well, that's actually a fantastic segue, because I wanted to jump and hear you talk a little bit about TrophySmack. Obviously, you kind of balance things over there, right? You're doing some content, some social, doing a whole bunch of stuff, right?
Yeah, so the cool thing with TrophySmack was like, and we talked about the Expo, I ran into Matt, and I was like, so you probably only sell trophies, a couple months a year, which isn't really the case, because he sells it for basketball, he sells it for baseball, sells it for corporate awards, like pretty much anything. Father's Day, we had a huge Father's Day over there for TrophySmack, because we had these custom belts where you could put a picture of like, you and your kid or you and your family into the belt, and the way that they do the custom designs over there is absolutely insane. Like it's intense the way they do these custom designs. It looks so good. Like the pictures that we got from it was really cool, just the joy that we got from that. But going back to it, I mean, we primarily do football stuff. Like that's how we're making it big. The fantasy football industry is our number one target market, of course. And we wanted to offer something, because you sell a lot of trophies in August. You sell a lot of trophies in January, February. You don't really sell too many trophies because it's not really on people's minds. So we wanted to be able to engage with the community a little bit more often, have a connection with the community where they don't feel like we're just trying to sell trophies. Like we're actually, trying to offer advice. We're trying to help everybody else out, but we're also here to have fun. Like we have plenty of smack talk over there. Our sub brand name over there is the Smack Zone, where we're just smack talking the whole time. We're not trying to compete with companies like Fantasy Pros. We're not trying to compete with ESPN. We're trying to have fun with our analysis, where we don't have to bring up a bunch of minute analytics and stuff. We just want to tell you which players to play to beat your opponent's asses. So, that's essentially where I came from and my pitch to Matt, and Matt loved it. We took off with it right off the bat. We now have, if you guys know him, Daddy's Home FF. We have Cooter Doodle over there writing for us. Nice. Ian Hardtits is doing our Off the Ropes. We have Sal Lita, who runs the Podathon. He's helping out with Off the Ropes. I mean, it's literally like a star-studded cast over there. Shane Manila, Nate Thomas is doing our images. Like we have a full squad over there. And last year we kind of just rolled out slowly. Like we were taking our time with it. We wanted to test the market a little bit, and we got such a great response come around February, March, when there was nothing else to find, and people were still finding articles and like, hey, this is actually something I can read and enjoy that doesn't have every analytical number backed up by every reason why they think a player can succeed. Like these articles are actually fun. So we're going to keep doing that. We're going to keep on pushing forward with that. And of course, we're going to keep making these championship trophies. Like the one you can see behind me. I mean, this thing is literally 5 feet tall. I'm not even kidding you. This thing is
they are badass.
Massive.
That's awesome.
I got a belt right here. Here, check this out. Got a belt right here, but like this isn't one of the custom belts. This is one of the ones that you can pre-order if you don't want to throw something on here. This thing is like 8-10 pounds, something like that. It's heavy. Like
they're very heavy. They are.
Yeah. They're massive. So, they did some stuff for the King's Classic over there for the Expo, right? We did the title belts over there. So it's just been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun rolling this place out. And TrophySmack has been, great to me and great to the other writers and content providers over there. Well, we actually just added on a TikTok person who we will be announcing in July, who is, something that I look really forward to it.
Fun.
I'm sorry?
Matt and TikTok? That's
Matt is doing our whole TikTok.
Oh my goodness.
God.
I'm not even on TikTok. I'm going to join and only subscribe to him only.
I don't know if the community guidelines would allow Matt to have a TikTok solely, of just his stuff. So
yeah, good point.
Yeah, we had to bring in somebody else because I don't think Matt would work out too well.
That would be banned quickly, but it'd be hilarious in the process.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, well, it really feels like, first of all, hearing how you got your job through the Expo, that's amazing. But what really feels like the common denominator here is how awesome the community as a whole is. Being able to bring everyone together in March, being able to all come together in August at the Expo, all of these things are super, super awesome. And again, I can't wait to meet everyone in, what'd you say, 8 weeks?
8 weeks.
8 weeks. Let's go. Let's go.
Yes. Woo! 8 short weeks. And we'll jump back to a couple of these things later on, and there's so much more to talk about. But let's get straight into some fantasy football, shall we?
So we can talk fantasy football on the show.
Yeah, it's going to be super exciting.
I don't know. I'm a little Let's do it.
Yeah. So we wanted to try with something a little bit more, interesting in the dead of the summer, right? And do something a little bit not necessarily super, super evergreen, because that's just not how the space always tends to work out for podcasts, but something that information will be valuable in perpetuity, not necessarily this information dies a month from now or a week from now or what have you. So what we wanted to do was go into how we can strategize our drafts, what strategies works, what are the predominant strategies. So what I wanted to start with asking you guys was, do you have a strategy that you go into with every single draft, or is it kind of dictated what your starting spot is? Yes, we're gonna pump this guide a couple times.
That's my strategy.
Yeah, absolutely.
It wins plenty of these.
There you go. But for instance, I know a lot of people are super into either avoiding or all in on running backs early. For example, I know, going running back early and getting receivers a little bit later was awesome last year, but some years it may not be like that. So what are your guys' strategies normally?
Chase?
All right, so the thing with strategies is it all depends on what kind of league you play in. Like if you're treating your fantasy or your fantasy football teams as a portfolio, right, where you have 30 teams, that's a lot different from having 2 to 3 teams. And then also when you end up having a big money league, that's also way different than playing in a $50 league. So like if you're playing $500, $1,000, entry fee per person, it's a lot different. Sometimes you have to, try and mix some stuff up and do stuff that you might not do in other drafts for the bigger money ones. If you have bigger fields, like the Scott Fishbowl, for example, where obviously we're not playing for money over there, but you want to try and diversify your portfolio, or trying to diversify your lineup to make it different from any other lineup, then you might want to do a few things different. For me personally, I have my guys and I try to stick into the ADPs and do tier-based drafting. I've been on tier-based drafting forever. So, for example, the difference for me between getting, a Najee Harris and Dalvin Cook in redraft, I don't care which guy I end up with. So if I'm on a turn, right, and I have the 10th overall pick, let's just say, and there's one wide receiver left, let's say Cooper Kupp or Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase, and he's sitting there at 10 for me. Meanwhile, there's 4 guys in the same tier running back where I don't care which one I end up with because they all are in the same tier for me. I want to make sure that I take that wide receiver who's still in the first tier and then let one of those running backs fall back to me. And typically this is how I try to navigate the entire draft. Tier-based drafting is something that I feel like is new to the community, but it really shouldn't be that new because, I've been doing my rankings for about 5 years now, and my rankings have always been in tiers. It's like the range of outcomes for these players where it's the floor and the ceiling are pretty much right around the same range. So I really don't care which guy I end up with. And, let's be honest, we can sit there and try to predict every last little metric, every last, little statistic, But for us to sit there and act like we know exactly what's going to happen and we can tell the future between a guy like Najee Harris and Dalvin Cook, who, in my opinion, have very similar outcomes. They could both see some targets. They could both see some rushing attempts. Both have poor defenses to an extent, so we're going to have to see some scoring on the side. It's something as to where, it's almost asinine, and I hate using that word sometimes, but I feel like it's asinine to try and say, hey, this guy is definitely ranked above this guy when they have very, very similar outlooks. Now, if you believe in a guy like, for example, DeAndre Swift, I know he's not very high up in a lot of people's rankings, but if you believe in a guy, put him in that tier. Don't rely on other people's tiers to tell you how you feel. But when it comes to trying to predict a very minuscule difference and being like, oh, this guy's definitely gonna be better than this guy by 15 points across the end of the season, it's just ridiculous to me.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's really good insight. Just kind of being patient in your drafts. Bob, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, a lot what Chase said makes a lot of sense, and I do. So my rankings are tier based as well. But of course, mine has that consistency twist in it. So I may have a guy a little higher, a little lower, because I don't see there hasn't been the consistency, or I don't see the consistency coming. Some guys are just inconsistent every year, like a Tyler Lockett. So those are the kind of guys that I would certainly have at a different level, but they could still be in the same tier, maybe just a little bit higher or lower. But like Chase said, you just have to go with the flow, and it depends where you pick, what your league setting is, the people you're drafting against. I mean, every time you go into a draft, I feel like it's not a different strategy. It's just you have to kind of just be ready to do whatever you need to do. I mean, I just did the FSGA draft. It was 14 teams. The back end was Scott Engel, Howard Bender, Adam Ronis, and myself were between 8, 10, 12, and 14th pick. So I know that if I don't get this guy now, it's Howard's either going to get him or Adam's going to get him, or So again, whole different world when you're going against a bunch of people like that versus your hometown people. You kind of know what you're getting there. So I just kind of, like you said, do the tiers, use the consistency data, and that's why I always tell people, it's like, look, my magazine is not the end all. Get your stuff from whatever site you like, whether it's Yahoo, ESPN, Football Guys, Fantasy Alarm, whatever. Then just get the guide and then use that consistency information to kind of make the tweaks between those tiers, within those tiers, of who you want a little higher, a little lower. That's what I've always used, and it's been worked out pretty well for me.
Can I add something to Bob's point as well when it comes to consistency? So in the first 3 rounds, I feel like you can absolutely, I don't think you can win your draft necessarily in the first 3 rounds, because I think league winners come in rounds 5 through 10 or even later. Even 5 is kind of early to be a league winner, but Cooper Kupp was definitely a league winner for some, so I'll leave him in there. However, you can lose your drafts in rounds 1 through 3. Absolutely. You could take a guy who, sure, Christian McCaffrey has all the upside in the world to become the RB1, but you're drafting him at RB4 or 5. Is there really that big of a discrepancy as to where the RB4 or 5 ends up being versus the RB1? Yes, there are times that it happens, but I don't think it's as big a discrepancy as what you could end up losing. I think you lose a lot more often in the first 3 rounds than you end up winning. So I'd like to be safer, to Bob's consistency point, in the first 3 rounds, and then go from there after that.
Well, and I think injuries play a big factor too. You were talking about Najee Harris versus Dalvin Cook. Right now you're going to lean towards Najee Harris, not because he'll score more points, but he probably won't miss 3 to 4 games like Dalvin Cook does every year.
And he'll play week 17.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, and all those things make a difference. And then that's what you got to, that's what goes in. That's the fun of doing all this, right?
Absolutely. Chris, what are you thinking? I mean,
I think both gentlemen are definitely on the page that I would believe in. I would tiers, and I also have the consistency is very important to me as well. And part of me find that consistency is that the fantasy matches the football, and that's a big thing for me. And in general, that when you are looking at what you see versus what you're kind of reading, and sorry. Chase kind of alluded to this before about, the statistics being kind of overwhelming, or analytics and people throwing a bunch of numbers at you. sometimes there's numbers that are thrown at you that don't really mean something versus what you see at the eye test or a scheme or how kind of the season unfolded. The team stink most of the year, so they threw the ball 100 more times than they typically would. So those things kind of, to me, are the first things I kind of look for to find that consistency and kind of set those tiers. And I think that both people are, both gentlemen are both on the page with that. You got to kind of trust what your board is. I'm not a big a person on the trying to read the room necessarily. If there's a guy that you value, that you like, that is kind of your guy, that can be the league winner sometimes for you. So sometimes you might kind of trust your gut on those things. Now, having said that, don't let the room kind of push you in a direction either. I agree that the draft's kind of its own beast in a sense, as Bob kind of alluded to, that each draft kind of has its own makeup as he kind of unfolds. But part of that, I also think, is not overreacting to things. And if there's value, taking the value, sticking to your board, or sticking to your value and those tiers. If there's a running back run, then you're reaching where the third round, a running back, take that best receiver. If there's a Maury Cooper or there's a Cooper Kupp or somebody had fallen down, Jeff Jefferson fallen on the board, don't reach for that second or third tier running back because you're desperate. Because a lot of times you're going to find you're going to wind up stumbling into that guy maybe seventh, eighth round and winds up being just a serviceable. On the flip side, I'm not big on this, waiting for the running back to kind of fall into your lap and the no running backs, schemes or the no receivers or no quarterbacks. And I do ultimately, and I'll, kind of go to you, Adam, I do value the quarterback position because to me, part of the most consistent position that you can have on your fantasy team is what you get out of your quarterback position week in, week out. So I value those a little higher than a lot of people will, and I try to ensure that I will go maybe a little higher to make sure I get a good one. And if I do not land kind of like my top tier guys, then I'm going to have 2 or 3 quarterbacks. Well, some people might have the roster spots at something else. I'm always kind of, as Chase kind of alluded to, playing it safe in a sense. If I'm going to take a Christian McCaffrey or I'm going to take an extra quarterback that I'm taking a shot on, I'm going to have a backup later on in the rounds where I'm kind of trying to prepare for that down the road. So for me, it's kind of strategizing with your roster as you're kind of, as it unfolds, having backups or guys that have upside or different things you can kind of use your lineup to see how things unfold down the season, down the road.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. It's super valuable to, if you're playing a super safe early, then you get to take your gambles late, or vice versa, just depending on how if you're being super risky with it, then you take your risks early and you try to play it safe later. Normally the first one, but to your point, Chase, earlier, some of those higher money leagues, sometimes you have to do things a little bit differently to kind of get an edge, or when you're trying to diversify or what have you. Bob, you brought up the name Tyler Lockett, and that's actually someone that, as I'm sure you've read, I put in the notes as an example for how you guys use a previous season or a couple previous seasons to your advantage when circumstances completely change. So, for example, a Gabe Davis, when fantasy football didn't matter, he popped the crap off, and we're still talking about it, right? Or Tyler Lockett, who was already inconsistent as all crap, but at least his full seasons were good. We've seen a bunch of good full seasons from him, and now what are we looking at as far as his offense? So how much of it is balancing this new situation is amazing versus everything's different, or the past seasons had been, great?
Chase, I'm sure, and Chris, I'm sure we'd all agree, this has to be the craziest, wildest offseason we've seen, and I've been watching football for a long time.
Oh yeah,
it's only going to get crazier.
There's so many players that have changed teams that it's almost, there's very few teams that you can say, hey, there wasn't any changes from the year before or significant changes. Actually, right. Buffalo is kind of one of them. The only real change is, Jamison Crowder is going to take over for Cole Beasley. Beyond that,
James Cook fan. Not if you're a James Cook fan.
Right. So we do have James Cook coming in as a rookie, and I get that, there's a lot of love for him. But again, I think there's just it's easier when there's not much changes to the team. Certainly, the consistency makes it difficult. Tyler Lockett has never been consistent, so I'm never worried about him. But what I'm worried about is like a DK Metcalf, who has been consistent for 3 straight years with Russell Wilson, has always been, he may not even score as many points as Lockett, but he's always right up there at 75, 80, 85%. Can he do that with Drew Lock? Doubtful. So yeah, there's a lot of changes this year. I've definitely adjusted my rankings more than I ever have. Looking at last year, I really don't know if it does much of anything. I mean, there's things we can put into play. I mean, we can see a Mike McDaniel going to Miami, who had Deebo Samuel. Now he has Tyreek Hill. So there's some consistency in coaching and schemes and offensive coordinators. Certainly some of that we look at, but definitely nothing like we've ever seen. So I think this year is definitely one of the most difficult to predict from a consistency standpoint. But I've certainly taken a lot of information and put that together when I'm writing up the profiles and doing the rankings. But I don't. It's not a cut and dry like it has been many years in the past.
So it's interesting, right? You brought up Tyler Lockett, and Tyler Lockett is a different case because I actually went back and I charted my starts versus sits for Tyler Lockett and my estimated points per week. And Russell Wilson actually does an excellent job of finding open receivers. He knows who's going to be open before they're even open, and they have a game plan for it every single week. And Pete Carroll's actually really good with that. When he's observing the head coach or the offensive coordinator room when they're doing the plays for the week, and he knows when offensive coordinators just are not in sync with the quarterback and with Russell Wilson. I think Russell Wilson's been smarter than every other offensive coordinator they've had.
Right.
To that point, the only ones that I actually got wrong was when Tyler Lockett, I think 2 years ago, he ended up having to go to the hospital for like a blood clot or something like that, or shin, if I remember right. And he ended up having 2 off weeks in like a 5-week span where he was not healthy. Outside of that, you could really tell. So Tyler Lockett, I think, should be more consistent this season just because Drew Lock isn't as good of a quarterback. We look at guys like Aaron Rodgers, right? Like you can tell when MVS was going to go off. Or at least when Aaron Rodgers was going to target MVS because he did have so many drops. You could tell with certain players like which weeks you wanted to play him, but you had to be DFS style, like savvy. Like you had to really look into it. So for the average fan, they're never gonna see that stuff.
Right.
However, I'm glad that you asked the question like as a whole because I actually have an article coming out which I can't announce who it's for yet. It's for a magazine that I'm very excited to write for. And what I did was actually broke down players over the past 10 years. And I think I charted 28 different players whose head coaches changed, but whose situation remained the same. So I did guys like Pierre Garçon, right? Who ended up having RG3 still with a little bit of Kirk Cousins in there. You had Shanahan change over to Jake Gruden. And Pierre Garçon needed to be the focal point of an offense that optimized the play action fake and used a lot of 2 tight end sets. Off slant routes because guess what? He couldn't get separation if he wasn't doing slant routes. And he had to be the primary target in that offense to be valuable because he was used a very similar way in San Francisco, but he was not the primary target, so he never was optimized. You had other players. Who were the other 2? It's been a few weeks. I can't remember. But I ended up breaking it down to like Kadarius Toney, Jalen Waddle, although Jalen Waddle did see Tyreek Hill added afterwards. And honestly, like you have to look at the scheme and you have to look at that. And I think Chris actually alluded to that earlier, looking at the scheme and looking at the players and their situations and seeing how it affects it. For example, Kadarius Toney is joining a Brian Daboll offense where they would take a player of Kadarius Toney's abilities and actually put him on the outside, although he has not played outside. Last year, he saw 2 targets, I believe, of 40 yards or 20 yards or more. There's only 2 of them that were actually on target. The other 2 were not on target. Both of the 2 that were on target were contested, and he came down with both those catches. So is there a chance that in Brian Daboll's offense where he wants to spread things out to give more rushing opportunities, because guess what? Brian Daboll's actually had beast rushers. Like it's been insane how great Brian, because we've seen Singletary, right? We've seen Zach Moss. And those are the only 2 that have actually failed as rushers in this offense, but they actually weren't that bad in terms of efficiency metrics when they were combined. But he has had some excellent rushers throughout his offensive coordinator stints. So are they going to try and spread it out, give Saquon Barkley work, and then also work Kadarius Toney on the outside more often? Are they going to still leave Kadarius Toney in situations where he can still see targets from the slot? I think that's something as to where like you need to pay attention to certain schemes and certain situation changes, because there were some of them where I did not like, and I wish that I remembered off the top of my head exactly who those were. Though Jacksonville was one of them. Jacksonville receivers didn't like any of those guys coming to Jacksonville. New head coach in, obviously Laviska Shenault was there. That was more of a situational change with Zay Jones and all this stuff, but Doug Peterson has never had a wide receiver lead the team in receiving, or at least receptions. Never had a wide receiver in 6 or 7 years of coaching and being the offensive mind over there. So, I don't like anybody from Jacksonville whatsoever. But paying attention to those schemes, I think, is immensely important.
I like that. One name I wanted to bring up, just because he is like the darling of fantasy football Twitter, especially before a particular move, which will make sense here in a second. Marquis Brown had a jarring situation change. Someone I loved. It seems like Chase probably also loved. Gonna go out on a limb there and say, situation completely changes. So how do you take that aspect, right? Because we love him because he's this freaking target hog. But if it's coming from a same person, or a different person rather, how do you adjust for that? I still love him, but I'm curious to hear. We'll go after that reaction. We're definitely going to go to you, Chase. But Chris,
go to Chase first, because if not, it'll explode.
I might explode like Marquis Brown this year. Marquis Brown is one of those receivers that actually has the wide receiver one finish overall throughout the season this year, and a lot of people forget that they played together in college, and that's where he was wildly efficient. That's where both of them made their names for themselves. But Kyler Murray completed the most amount of 20-yard passes downfield last season, air yards downfield last season, while he also ended up having the highest completion rate of throws 20 yards or more last season. He did that with Christian Kirk. He did that with a hurt DeAndre. I mean, like that's incredible. I mean, this guy is a literal downfield machine because they have to play the safeties up to defend up against the rush. You have to put a spy on him at all times. That leaves a lot of outside one-on-one coverage. But, I mean, think about his receivers. Christian Kirk's a slot guy that was used as a long slot, and then he ended up taking over as the wide receiver one. They had, what's the big guy's name? AJ Green, of course. Wesley, right?
Yeah, Wesley.
Who was a big target. I mean, but honestly, like this guy was overly accurate in terms of, air yards of 20-yard passes more. Now he goes with Marquis Brown, who is the king of, getting deep downfield and catching some amazing balls. Yeah, sure, he ended up having some drops, some brutal drops. I'll never forget that game where he had 3 downfield drops because it killed me in DFS that week. I think I would have won $1 million, just like we all would have won, if that happened. But no, it's going to be an insane hookup. They already have the chemistry. This is the perfect system for Marquis Brown, who should be playing out of the slot similar to Christian Kirk, but who also could see targets close to the line of scrimmage. It's disappointing because I'm such a big Rondale Moore fan, but Marquis Brown should be the league target getter on this. AJ Brown, one more year older. Like I said, Wesley earlier, like there's no real targets over there. Maybe Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz gets some targets. Maybe.
Zach Ertz will definitely get more targets. Yeah. I mean, you got a lot of targets last year when Hopkins was out, and they were kind of relying on him in those games. So I could definitely see Ertz benefiting.
I just don't know how you don't have Marquis Brown as a top 15 wide receiver this year in redraft, possibly top 10. I'm drafting right around like wide receiver 11 or 12 because I want to make sure I get him, but I don't want to make sure I reach too far. Otherwise, I'd be taking him top 10 every time.
All right, Chris, what are your thoughts on that situation? Again, just a big change.
Oh, and by the way, he only played 13 games last season. He did all that. He had the most downfield completions or on-target passes downfield above 20 yards in 13 games. Sorry.
I love it.
I think Marquis Brown is definitely a guy who I've always kind of liked and thought was kind of underutilized the Greg Roman system. I think he will be freed in this system. He did play with Kyler Murray in Oklahoma, so they are familiar with each other. I don't necessarily think he's going to play a lot in the slot, so that part I disagree. I don't necessarily, agree with. I do think he's going to see plenty of targets, though. I think there's going to be plenty of targets for him and more. I think both those guys are guys you like to have in your lineups. Ertz is continue to eat. He got paid decent money this year, so they're going to have him for at least another year or two before the young kid takes over there. So I think we look at Arizona as an offense in general. When you go from a team that's going to throw the ball majority of the time, 60-40 at least, or 65-35, from a team that basically was the opposite in the Ravens, I think you're looking at, fantasy numbers are going to kind of follow that. When Marquis Brown was utilized and, featured in the offense, he used to put up big numbers. The only concern I would have for him, being a top 10 or top 15 would be, does he get the touchdowns? Because that does somewhere Kyler Murray kind of struggles getting the touchdowns, and through the passing, through the air, and then you'll also have some other mouths to feed. So that's the only thing maybe knocks Marquis Brown a little bit. But I do think there's opportunities when guys move on. I think, looking at Allen Robinson is a guy for me who's going to be definitely, don't want to compare what happened last year in Chicago versus what's going to happen for him when the Rams. You saw OBJ basically get his career written off by a lot of people, but then suddenly when you play with a good quarterback and a good scheme, you rediscover what you can do. So I think those things definitely do matter. Opportunity does matter. A.J. Brown and some of those guys, Tyreek Hill, I do go with more track records. What kind of player are you? And, what was kind of the people go to draft capital a lot. What's the kind of investment that people are putting into you? So usually when you pay a top tier receiver, they're going to figure out how to get you the ball, especially that first year. So that's what I kind of follow along with too as well.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Like, at the end of the day, football is both a sport and a business if you're spending that kind of money on someone. And also that draft capital, it absolutely, you're going to use that. I also liked that you brought up James Cook, because I want to talk about how you guys treat rookies in redraft, because that's a kind of comes along with the different situations. But at the same time, obviously, Bob, you can't pull any inconsistency from what they can do at the NFL level. It can be really interesting because on occasion you can find some guys who will light up your leagues, like Jamar Chase last year, for instance. If you happen to draft around, and we'll get into draft times, if you happen to draft around when he was getting the drop season preseason, you got incredible value there. So yeah, how do you guys treat rookies?
All right, I'll go first to get it out of the way, because then I know everybody else loves rookies. It's not that I hate rookies. Everybody says, "Oh, you hate rookies because you don't draft them because there's no consistency." That's not entirely true. But I do an article every year, and I've did this data since 2010. There have been 482 wide receivers, quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends drafted in the first 4 rounds only. Of those, about 10% of them earned over a 60% consistency rating in their rookie season, which means 90% of them did not. Therefore, usually, unless, and again, there's rarities. I mean, we all knew what we were going to get with Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott, Jamar Chase. Kyle Pitts last year was the first tight end to be over 60% in over 6 years. There's certainly situations that rookies are in the right spot at the right time with the right talent. But the numbers show that when you start looking at these guys as maybe your wide receiver 3 or 4, and you're really going to count on them, 90% of the time these guys aren't pulling their weight on your fantasy teams. Maybe they will late in the year. Most of the time they're not good, but a lot of times you draft them, they stink for the first 5 or 6 weeks to get used to the NFL, and you drop them, and then they go off. So, that's my feeling. That's my numbers. Do I like a James Cook? Absolutely. There's certain players that I think are in the right spots that can get some numbers this year. It's just a question of, do you want to draft them, and how long do you wait before you start them, that kind of stuff. But that's my thoughts.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, especially these last 2 years, it's felt like when I jump into my redrafts, or even am looking at ADP, there's some rookies even at the top end where I'm like, I love you as a prospect, absolutely love you, and I think you can be great round 1. It's like the hype from you being the most recent person in the news can sometimes push you a little bit, where it's like, I think you can be great for fantasy football, but I don't know if you're outperforming some of these guys with proven track records. Yeah, Chase, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, outside of Marquis Brown, who we just talked about, that's the case for a lot of these rookies. They come out and they suck right off the bat. But at the same time, like you get such values on them, and over the past 3 or so years, we've seen a significant uptick in the success rate of rookies right off the bat, and I think that has to do with a lot of the development going into private schools and into private training camps where agents are finding kids in high school. And I know it's illegal, but they're pretty much buying their way into these camps that are making these wide receivers so much more successful. Plus, wide receivers are making bank, and they have been making bank for the past about 6 or so years. I think Julio Jones, like the first big contract, if I remember correctly, where it was like, oh, this guy's making money. So guess what parents do? They're watching the money. They're seeing their kids come up in high school, and they're making sure they're wide receivers. They're not cornerbacks anymore. They're not running backs anymore. They're not tight ends anymore. They're wide receivers. So these kids are now getting trained at the wide receiver position since they were 14 years old. More players, more development, more opportunities for talent, more opportunities for hits, and then you start to see them filter through in college, and that's when you actually start seeing a higher hit rate from the rookie wide receivers. You see better route running because they're trained, such as Terry McLaurin. You see better opportunity, breakaway speed, like we have from Jamar Chase, where, yeah, he might not have run the best 40 in the world, but dude, that 40 was great. He's able to break away like he did in the Kansas City game, which comes to mind. We're just seeing a different level of talent from the wide receiver position from the rookie season on that I think we've ever seen before in the NFL. And it's something as to where I avoided rookies in most drafts. I didn't want to draft them because maybe one out of 5 or 6, early rookie wide receivers actually hit. Meanwhile, maybe 2 out of 6 rookie running backs hit that were drafted early. Now it's like, okay, you actually have to open your eyes. You have to look at the system and the scheme, which we talked about earlier. How's this player fit? Is he going to be, a stud? And do you want to waste a draft pick on him? It's tough to sit there and say you don't want to after what you've seen over the past 3 years or so.
Yeah,
Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase,
So, Chris, who would be in this draft? I know I'm trying to more or less not get too crazy about just this year, but who would be those guys for you this year that you think can actually be good value at where they're going up top?
Well, I do think there's more increasingly, transferable skills, and I think it's also has to do with the play calling and just the schemes in general. We see a lot more of the college scheme in the NFL game. The translation is easier for a lot of these players. They're not asked to do nearly as much. The patterns are different. The ball is kind of manufactured, the RPO action, things like along those lines. You can manufacture guys' touches. So the receivers, I do think the top tier guys are people I'm especially watching this year. Drake London is a guy at the top of my board. Opportunity meets, reality in the sense. A guy who's 6'5", plays a slot receiver. Always big on slot receivers, particularly on bad offenses or bad teams. They usually get peppered with targets because they fall down big time and the guy gets the ball thrown to him. So those things help. Look at the Kyle Pitts, kind of pairing with him. That also helps kind of keep safety attention off. It helps keep the linebackers. So you're going to get mismatches. And then you have a guy, quarterback position, whether it's Mariota or the young kid Ritter. It's not going to really necessarily matter. Guys are going to look for kind of their security blanket. So we saw Cooper Kupp kind of be Matthew Stafford's security blanket. Not to say Drake London's going to be put at those same numbers, but a lot of his skill set reminds me of what Cooper Kupp can do, and he has a bigger body in a sense as well. We saw Chase Claypool dominate with a big body in the red zone. So you put all those things together. That's a guy I love this year. Some of the guys on the flip side, though, that I do have a little bit of interpretation on some of the, do they come in with talent meets kind of opportunity is Gabe Wilson, for example, for the Jets. I love the Jets guys. Bryce Hall as well. But I can say that, it's a mouthful. But I think both those guys have kind of, with the system, with some other mouths to feed, might find a hard time to kind of meet those consistent players you want to have in your lineup, or you might not know how to play them. For example, like Adam, talked a lot last year about Elijah Moore, a guy you absolutely love. I like a lot too. Well, where does he, Wilson, and Berrios play? And they add, different guys in the equation. Oh, they busted Corey Davis. Oh, also they had 2 tight ends. Oh, they had 3 running backs. So when you start looking at all the mouths to feed with our young quarterback, suddenly you don't want to necessarily spend draft capital where some of these guys might go. So I think there's a lot of top tier guys you're keeping your eye on, and then you're looking for some of those guys, opportunity meets reality, but not meeting, reacting too much to the hype in a sense. So I'll give you an easy example. The Chiefs receiver position, because they drafted a receiver, everybody's like, oh, that's the guy that you have to have. Is it? Start looking at some of the things around it. Is it the guy that's kind of be the top of your board? or is it going to be somebody that people are kind of projecting just because there seems to be an opportunity there that might not be necessarily manufacture itself early in the season? Chiefs kind of a complex passing scheme, so usually rookies don't kind of hit the ground running. So just kind of keeping those things in mind when you're kind of picking these rookies.
Yeah, that's a really great point, especially with the Chiefs. I mean, I think that's certainly a situation where you could see a lot of guys be not quite, have good volume, but not enough volume to be super fantasy viable. It could be one of those, we've got a couple guys in the 500 to 700 mark, but not anyone that's someone you're in love with from a fantasy perspective. Could be really interesting. Bob, Chase, go ahead.
Real quick, I just want to connect a couple dots because the number one stack that I'm actually chasing for redraft is going with Kyler Murray, Marquis Brown, and then Drake London, who he brought up. They have an advantageous schedule in week 17 they play. So, there's a lot of younger corners over there. Patrick Peterson's for the Vikings. They did re-sign whoever their number 3 corner was, but Drake London, Kyle Pitts, either one of those guys stacked in a draft with Kyler Murray and Marquise Brown could be like a DFS, mind blown potential matchup where you have 2 bad defenses going up against each other with 2 offenses that are both, merging to an extent. And you could end up having probably just from that stack alone, 40 to 50 fantasy points, minimum, like 40 to 50 fantasy points just from 3 players.
Yeah, and that's actually a really interesting rabbit hole to jump down, is looking ahead towards the end of the season when you're drafting, going, all right, I'm just going to plug myself into championship weekend. And when I'm there, what can my guys do then? Avoiding matchups towards the end of the season. How much of the end of the season are you really looking at when you're drafting?
Bob, I took your question, so.
That's fine. I really don't look at it. I'll be honest with you. My whole model has always been built on you got to make the playoffs to win a championship. If you don't make it, you can have the best damn lineup for weeks 15, 16, 17, but it ain't going to do you a hell of beans if you don't make it. And so that's why I kind of go, hey, I want to have the players I can count on a week to week and get there. If I get there, then I've got a 1 in 4, 1 in 6 chance, whatever to win the championship. Not that I maybe won't look at it halfway through the season when I'm, maybe I'm off to a 6-2 start. Now I might be looking to make a trade, to get some waiver guys, to pick up a guy that might be right behind a player, handcuff or a backup, that if this guy gets hurt, I could have him for the playoffs. But at the draft, I probably don't pay that much attention.
Yeah, Chris?
I was just going to say, one of the things I definitely do pay attention to a degree. I think Bob makes an excellent point. The most important point probably of this whole show is you got to make the playoffs first. You got to make the playoffs first. If you don't make the playoffs, who cares what you have for going into the playoff weeks? So I do think that's extremely important. But I think you can keep it in your mind when you're kind of building your roster. Bob talked about some of the rookies that people drop after the first 6 weeks because they didn't get off that great start. Well, keeping in mind what you're invested in, if I'm going to take a rookie, maybe I'm looking to start in the first 6 weeks so I have him come playoff time if he gets his stretch. Or running backs where they're looking at guys who are going to have a little bit wear and tear on them. So you're looking for that stretch run. Rookie guys, especially younger running backs, where you'll kind of wait for them to kind of learn how to pass protect. Maybe by mid-season, they get a chance to start getting more touches. So like a Michael Carter last year, he kind of carried people for, throughout a stretch where he kind of took over despite not being the guy early in the season, kind of being forgotten about. So I think that's the part I kind of pay attention to. And in particular, I like watch for bruising running backs, backups particularly. So like AJ Dillon, for example, some of those guys that, we saw last year that as the season progresses are going to be a pain in the butt to tackle. And we start thinking about the weather getting colder and you start thinking about playoff football, teams start playing a little tighter, some teams are getting a little more physical, and a lot of times it's nice to have those running backs to kind of rely on. So I think that's one of the things I kind of look at in this, in the draft. I'm not necessarily going to spend extra draft capital super early to make sure I have the best lineup for 16, 17, but I'm going to make sure that maybe when I get to round 15, 16, maybe I'm adding a player here or there. I'm taking a shot looking at, hey, what's the upside for you on my roster down if guys are to kind of, falling off or injuries happen, what's an upside to kind of ride the second half of that last quarter of the season.
Yeah, and the point that I was making earlier is more towards tier drafting, right? So like you have everything that I say you have to take back to the core of where we started the conversation, whereas tier drafting. So for example, I have like Traylon Burks, Gabe Wilson, Drake London all in the same tier, right? For redraft leagues. And I'm like, oh, I started out with Kyler Murray, I started out with Marquis Brown. This right here is going to put Drake London above those two because they're all in the same tier. If I start out with, if I end up with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett or something like that, and I know the Jets, or I started with the Jets stack, right? But, the Jets play the Seahawks in week 17, and I have an option to take DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett or, versus whoever else. I think you have to take your drafting strategy always back to the tier base and never reach for players that you don't have a need to reach for, especially when it's out of line with ADP as well. I say follow the ADP first and then the tier second.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, you spoke on it earlier. Like, the NFL and fantasy can kind of match in some ways, and I think the best player available kind of approach is certainly even more so in fantasy. Really, kind of the more important thing, because at the end of the day, they're all value, and if you say are super weak at a position, continue drafting the value, and you can move around later on. You don't have to, unless you're in some kind of best ball, you don't have to lock in the same lineup you drafted week one.
Real quick, does anybody remember a time that they got in second place and they actually talk shit to their league mates about the time they came in second place? Because you need to win the championship for your season to matter. You can come in third place all you want, you can come in second place all you want, but it doesn't matter unless you win the trophy. Unless you're taking home that championship trophy,
that big one behind you.
There's like this one right here, or the title belt. Let me go ahead and throw this up there from TrophySmack, of course. There's no reason to even play fantasy. So I'd like to highlight the week 17 stuff, inside of those tiers and the best players available.
Yeah, I think that is a really good point. Not necessarily making those decisions only with those in mind, but if you need a quick tiebreaker, that's certainly something that's valuable. Bob, I wanted to come back to you, and actually, Chase, you inadvertently reminded me of this. When we were talking about rookies, you mentioned that the consistency year one normally is super low. Mm-hmm. Do you kind of, year 2, year 3 program in, I guess, a little bit of a jump for those guys who you knew they were inconsistent, but towards the end they started to light it up? Are you like, all right, I'm going to raise you necessarily above what your rookie year consistency may dictate?
Yeah, one of the things that I put in every one of the player profiles in the guide is their week-by-week consistency, game-by-game consistency chart showing all 17 weeks to show those guys who do make that push. And there's no question that those guys I will move up and really highlight, because they won't get the love that they should, because people, again, will look at total points, they'll look at their, overall average, and what they're missing out is that, hey, that last 6 games, that last 4 games, they really started to gel with the quarterback that's still there. And, so yeah, there's always something that I'm trying to find within the numbers. It's not just one number consistency. And if you're 75%, you're great. If you're 50, you suck. No, that's not. It's okay. What other things came into play? Did their quarterback miss the last 5 games? Did 2 out of their 3 offensive linemen be out, so the running backs, their running game struggled? So all those things come into play. It's not just he's 75% consistent, so he's good, so you play him. Well, maybe, or if he's 20, he's not. Allen Robinson was a good example Chris brought up. You can't look at last year and go, hey, Allen Robinson stinks, we shouldn't play him. No, he's going to be the second wide receiver for the Rams. And guess what? Robert Woods last year, through the first 7 or 8 games that he played, 88% consistency during that time, with Cooper Kupp also on the field. So the number 2 receiver in LA can put up some serious numbers, and Robert Woods was doing that. So yeah, I'm all in with Allen Robinson as a guy. And basically I have him right there with Marquis Brown. I'd like to get both of them, because I think you can get them in back-to-back rounds just because of where they're falling ADP wise. Allen Robinson's a little bit lower than Marquis, but boy, if you can get those 2 guys as your 2-3, and with a top tier guy like a Devontae Adams or something, man, I just think you have just a golden year at wide receiver.
Yeah, that's an absolutely really, really good point.
Hey, Bob, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to go off topic here, Adam, but I need to get this information from Bob because he is a consistency guide, and I have to know this. And I know, we're trying to keep this somewhat, green, but Chase Claypool is such a massive topic right now because everybody thinks that he went downhill, right? Like everybody's like, oh, he was great his rookie year, and then he fell off. But in all reality, the only thing that fell off were touchdowns. However, I do know that he was very hit or miss pending coverages. And last year, Ben Roethlisberger could not hit him deep at all. So I'm very curious. And you give me a little nod as soon as you're ready because I can keep talking as long as we need to. Okay.
Always got the numbers, bud.
Chase Claypool. How you feeling about Chase Claypool this season? Can we get a little bit of insight to your consistency guide?
So just to give you the numbers last year, 37 the total points. He missed 2 games. Only 40% consistency, which ranked him 56th amongst all wide receivers. So to say the least, not a lot of love. They definitely targeted Deontay Johnson a lot. They like Freiermuth, but let's be honest, because Big Ben couldn't throw the ball deep. So now we've got Trubisky or Pickett. So what's the trade-off? Maybe a little less accuracy, a little more depth. I'm not gonna. If Chase Claypool falls to me as my wide receiver 5 or 6, maybe. But I feel like then there's all kinds of other guys in that area that I'm like, I take a chance on, like, Chris Olave or, Corey Davis, McCole Hardman, Jarvis Landry, who's down in that area. I mean, right now with him in New Orleans, I like him a lot more than I would like Chase Claypool. So
the Injured List podcast. Oh my God, down there in the comment. Dude, he's not a tight end. He was never a tight end. He was always a wide receiver. Get out of here. I think they're going to move him in the slot, though. And Mitch Trubisky, while targeting Darnell Mooney, who has similar talents, just less of a physical profile, was, I think, 64.3% completion rate while targeting him downfield, if I remember right. And ended up having a very high success rate when Mitch Trubisky was on the field because he was able to scramble and make plays, which broke down the safety coverage. So I'm interested in Claypool, but I can understand this consistency aspect. It scares a lot of people away, but I'm interested.
Right. And he has nowhere to go but up based on last year. So that's a good thing. And, he feels should be a top 3 receiver anyway. So he's got the confidence level all over the place. So.
He definitely has the confidence.
Hey, he has metrics similar to Calvin Johnson, right? Like that was his workout metrics. They were
Mapletron.
Yeah, he's Mapletron.
There we go.
And I mean, we have a comment once again. He's built like a tight end. I don't see his build like a tight end.
Height, outside of height.
He's not playing tight end.
No. Yeah, no, he's not a tight end. He'll play big slot in this system they have running over there for the Steelers, and I'm really excited for that.
I found it really interesting because part of me wants to join you on that train, Chase, but it's kind of, I feel quarterback dependent on, because with Trubisky, I agree, because I think Trubisky, you make an excellent point. You get him breaking out of the pocket, you can find a lot of interesting matchups there. I don't know if I feel the same way about Pickett, and I don't know which way that pendulum's swinging.
A lot of people miss this other part of the interview, right? Because everybody's so focused on him saying he was wide receiver 3. He's like, somebody asked about his quarterback situation, and without him even hesitating, without him even going to Mitch Trubisky, he's like, oh, Pickett's going to create some big-time opportunities for us. He's like, he can move out of the pocket. He's very similar to Joe Burrow with being able to navigate with his speed, and he's going to be able to create one-on-one matchups downfield because safety's going to be so concerned about him scrambling. He didn't even bring up Trubisky, and I like Trubisky. I thought Trubisky was going to start, and now, oh my God, my heart is like on the other side of this. I am so confused. Like I'm like a kid at a middle school dance, not knowing which girl to ask to dance, like just being a flower on the wall because I'm like, oh my God, what is going to happen at quarterback now? I was so sold on Mitch Trubisky being the starting quarterback, but I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think it's going to matter, Chase.
Well, from a football perspective, no, but I think that their habits as far as which one of the receivers are targeting could be a little bit different.
Well, just on that real quick though, like you look at, I'm not a huge fan of Pickett, and I don't think he has the arm strength, but he did, feature outwardly a lot last year in college, so he did look for the bigger receiver. He will throw the ball up to the red zone, and I think Trubisky has similar kind of skill set in a lot of ways. the thing that I think for Chase Claypool is you look at the draft capital spent on Pickens and is Chase Claypool in the Pittsburgh Steelers' future. That would be my concern. Raylan McLeod played over him a lot last towards the end of the season. Now, when I think of Chase Claypool's upside, where I think these kind of guys is when I get into maybe like around 9 or 10, maybe even a little bit later than that, I'm looking for touchdown producers. So, for example, Mike Williams was a guy like that. I liked that last year. Mike Williams coming into last year was a very inconsistent player. People kind of were down on him, but he's a guy that when he pops off, he'll get you double-digit touchdowns. Chase Claypool to me is that guy you can kind of take a shot on with that, but I don't think it's the guy you're banking on. We look at, like you talked about, the different mouths to feed in Pittsburgh. Harris is going to get a lot of targets. Vermouth is going to get a lot of targets. Johnson's definitely going to get a lot of targets. You drafted Pickens in the second round for Pittsburgh. Like I said, McLeod came back. So you look at all different mouths to kind of feed. I think Claypool could be a guy, but isn't somebody I'm necessarily going to jump out, to go get too high.
I mean, it's kind of like people aren't acting like Claypool drew over 100 targets his first 2 seasons, though. He's gotten over 100 targets in his first 2 seasons throughout. Now, they were downfield inaccurate targets. So, sure, we could say target premium was high, but he didn't see accurate targets, which is a big reason why he didn't produce. And then from 9 touchdowns down to 2 this past season. So it's difficult to sit there and assume what we know, but I think they're going to keep Pickens on the outside. And Chase Claypool actually played the highest percentage of snaps on the team in the slot from 2021 into 2022. So with the wide zone run scheme, they kind of want to run. It's a weird wide zone run scheme where they want to run a lot of bootleg, play action stuff, kind of similar-ish to Tennessee, but not entirely. I think San Francisco might go a very similar way to what they're going to do. But they could use Chase Claypool on the field in 2 wide receiver sets and 3 wide receiver sets, but use Chase Claypool in the slot off play action. I mean, you could see some major efficiency off that. I think I've predicted right around 13 air yards per target. He ends up with 1,000 yards and 70 to 80 targets or so, I think is what I have meant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think with Pittsburgh, it's especially interesting just kind of looking at how much of their scheme was what was originally wanted to be ran, which I think is a good portion of it. But I'm sure there were some things they were looking at Ben's limitations and going, this changes what I want to do. Kind of when you're talking about their scheme being ran in a very weird way. Well, it's a lot harder to, do frequent bootlegs like is normally associated with that when you're running with Big Ben versus a Kenny Pickett or a Mitch Trubisky who can have the legs to do that a little bit better. Right. All right, we'll go through a thing or two more and then get you guys out of here.
Yeah, sorry for throwing off the show, Adam. I apologize.
Oh, no worries. No worries. The conversation's important.
I hijacked it.
No worries.
All good information, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. As long as the information's good. What stat do you guys find to be most important? Bob, I think I know your answer, but I'll still field you the question. But Chase, I know you said...
I'll go last.
Yeah. Chase, I know you had said, for instance, that you were trying to, keep the stats kind of lower and make your writing super, super interesting. But at the same time, you've pulled some really good ones. So it's kind of, to me, not putting words in your mouth, but sifting through the bullshit stats and kind of finding the super, super key ones. And then the rest of it's, schemes, just knowing ball, etc. So yeah, Bob, you offered yourself last. I'll take you up on that. But yeah, guys, what stats are the most important?
Chris, you want to start out with this one?
For me, myself, stats, the things that I'm looking at are definitely, what kind of ratios are you using for your passing attack, your rushing attack, those kinds of things? Am I going to look at air yards depending on, the situations? I think there's certain quarterbacks you just know the air yards are going to kind of be different than other guys. So, for example, if I'm looking at Jimmy Garoppolo and looking at Matthew Stafford, if the air yards on Jimmy Garoppolo's are higher than Matthew Stafford's, I'm not going to necessarily bank Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be the better guy because the air yards show that he did better did last year. But I'm looking like I talked about, kind of the product matching the field. Having said that, you're looking for opportunity. If you see a Rams offense, as Bob kind of alluded to, and Al Robinson, an opportunity, what Robert Woods was doing those first 6 weeks, you see a receiver has a similar profile, but maybe a bit better in the red zone, then you might be willing to more take a shot on some of those guys where you see the numbers that are opportunity there. There are the numbers there to kind of meet the demand. I look at targets, but I want to see catch rate or catchable balls is more what I look for targets. So when it comes to numbers, I don't really want to know that you get 8 targets. How many of those were catchable? Because I see a lot of targets, thrown out 9 yards out of bounds. Well, that was great, but that didn't help anyone. So when I look at that, where air yards is a big one with that. Well, the guy launched the ball, in his direction, 90 yards out of down the field, but it was an air yard, so somehow it matters for the guy next week. I want to see, the targets where they kind of catchable balls and where they in situations that the game matters. A lot of times you see garbage yards or garbage points. That's where I got to Bob's consistency. Sometimes you got to kind of read the stat sheets and stat boards and see, does this guy do it this week in, week out, or is this because they were down by 30 and he's a slot receiver and they throw the ball to him 9 times. So those kinds of things to me that matter. That's stats I'm kind of looking for. The consistency is my big thing, and looking kind of into those numbers to see what's the numbers I want to see that kind of shows me, are you the consistent player or just kind of catching something at, lightning in a bottle, so to speak. I think season-long stats are the hardest ones to kind of take into consideration because a lot of people forget those 3 or 4 games where the guy did nothing, and that cost you 4 games during the season. So that's where it matters, how many games you win week to week, week out, that where the guy finishes on the board. So I think that definitely matters for my numbers-wise.
Yeah, I think rushing yards per attempt matter the most. That's my final. No, I'm just kidding.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night. No, so I do a lot of DFS and whatnot, a lot of dynasty stuff. Redraft for me is fun, but for DFS, I developed a metric that I call the DOE score. It's a dump-off containment efficiency score. It actually measures defense's abilities to contain a running back. And last year it hit at 82%, as to where a pass-catching running back who saw at least 3 targets per game on average would end up performing about 8 points above a team that was in the bottom half versus the upper half. Teams like the Carolina Panthers were really good at containing pass-catching running backs. The Bears were another team. Actually, the Texans were a really good team as well. I think it had to do with that middle linebacker. What was it, Kruger Hill or whatever his name was? Sorry, I don't do DFS. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I don't do IDP. So all those IDP guys, sorry about that.
You can run the ball versus those teams as well. That also helps. Go ahead, sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You can run the ball really well versus all those teams that you named as well. I think it's a big part of it.
That's always a part of it. So I actually have all that stuff. It's actually a complicated formula that I learned how to develop through some classes on Code Academy to learn how to code certain things. Because I didn't even own a laptop 3 years ago. So all this stuff that I've been doing is like through like written paper, all that stuff. So anyways, those scores is really important for me in terms of week to week type statistics. But in terms of season long or redraft, everything changes so much. Like everything from the system to the teams they play. And I was sitting there, I was thinking about it earlier today, and I'm like, dude, like, how are you supposed to predict what's going to happen from season to season after teams play a completely different schedule from the year that they played before that, from different head coaches, from different this, from different that? And it's like, just trust the people who are giving you advice in what to do, because they are doing so much more research, in terms of the analysts out there. Like, I'm spending 12 hours a day doing research and trying to figure out, this or that or this or that. And it's like, the average fan doesn't have time. So find someone that you trust, find someone that you like, find someone that you're entertained by, listen to what they're saying, go check it out yourself. Make sure you do your research, right? Because you don't want to just buy a home from somebody that tells you to buy a home, right? Just because they're funny or they're entertaining. You don't want to sit there and go to a conference just because they say it's good. You want to go somebody, like Bob Long, who has the Expo, who is good, and who you have sources who say it's an awesome place to go to. Like, do your research, make sure it's good. But honestly, like, I trust the stats that the analysts that I trust put out, and the discussions that I have amongst other people, and the research that I do to make sure that the people that are telling me what to do is right. I like to follow that up. But in terms of like people who don't do this full time, like, it's very tough to trust any kind of stat or anything, because you have so many different variables within the source. Like, it's impossible to get a hold on that unless you're spending multiple hours throughout the day on multiple different analytical platforms. So that's my advice. You just find somebody, tap into what they're doing, and see if what they're doing is the right way. And if so, follow what they do up until you start to get a grasp for it yourself.
Yeah, that is definitely much more feasible for the average humans. That's a good answer. All right, Bob, what can you have here?
No, yeah. I mean, obviously, consistency is the one. But as I've said before, and Chase, I think you kind of, I'm going to kind of piggyback off you too, is you never stop learning in this industry. I don't care how smart you think you are. I don't care how much money you won in high stakes. You never stop learning. Somebody comes up with something new, different. I mean, like I just learned about Chase thing. I'm very intrigued. I'm going to talk to him after we're gonna start conversing because I want to learn about this. You know, that's what's great about this community is we all have, you know, our talents or our expertise in various things. And then someone comes up with something new and you're like, oh, that's interesting. And you read about it and you kind of test it out. Like Chase said, you can't take everybody's word for granted, but then start building that, like I call it, you know, it's kind of like the team around you, you know, the offensive coordinators, defense, you know, basically that's your fantasy, you know, that's your team that you're building that you're going to rely on. You're going to go to for this information or that information because you trust them and they've helped you win before and that information was beneficial. There's lots of people out there. So, you know, it's funny because when I put together the Expo and we had it last year, a lot of people actually kind of in a disappointing way said, well, it's just a bunch of analysts. There's no fans that we're talking to. And I went, we're all fans. I mean, like Chase said, I learned as much from that weekend from those people on stage than I would get from being on Twitter for 2 weeks. We should never stop learning. And so, you know, I have my stuff, but I make my tweaks. Trust me, I'm tweaking Marquis Brown up 2 points, 2 slots or 3 slots this week to get him in the top 15 because Chase is like, yeah, this, and that. I'm like, yeah, that's good information. I was not aware of that. Boom. You know, so, you know, nobody should have the audacity or the ego to say I'm the smartest guy in the room and what I say is always wins and because I've won 100,000 in high states or I won $1 million in a DFS. Okay, good for you. Congratulations, and you know, God bless you because you did it. We didn't, but you know, we're all always learning. Consistency is just a part of that. And that's what I tried. You know, I always say I'm the fries to the Happy Meal. I'm not what you're going to rely on, but it still tastes good, and you want to add it to the package, and you know, and tweak your lineups and help you maybe build a little stronger because, you know, in a 12-team league, you know, 6 to 8 teams don't make it every year in the playoffs, and if you're the one that doesn't make it and you just miss every year, then I always say maybe having a few more consistent players might help you get those extra 1 or 2 games.
Anything can happen. Any Jamar Chase versus Kansas City can happen.
So, yeah, I mean, as much as I rely on consistency to help fine-tune my stuff, and it certainly has been beneficial to me, I will never say that it's the end all. You know, go get other information, listen to SiriusXM, you know, subscribe to various sites that are out there that are, you know, have great information. I mean, listen to people like Chase, Chris, you know, you, Adam, myself, listen to the podcast, gather that information, get those tidbits and those nuggets, and then use them to build a draft arsenal that will help you kick ass. And that's what you got to do.
I mean, that was an awesome answer, and I really, really wish that we could send her off with that one. But there is one question that I think is super important.
What? That was super good. That was such a great.
It was like we could just walk out of here with that, and it would be amazing.
I was about to take my headphones off and just
Yes. Thank you. Good night.
Yes.
We love you.
God. All right, Bob. Can we do that again one more time?
I'll do another one.
Yes. But this is, I think, going to be really important and Chase, I really loved how you directed your answer towards the average person playing fantasy football, and this is what I think is important. How do you take into account the bye week for when you're drafting? Because I think it's something that falls in between the cracks, so to speak, for a lot of people drafting, and then they finish their draft, and then they hadn't even looked at the bye weeks until, they drafted, and they go, Oh, I have 6 people who are taking buys at the same time. So how much is that something that you're taking into account versus not?
So bye weeks for me, I just want to make sure that I either go all in on one bye week or I don't do multiple bye weeks that screw me over. So like, I don't want to do my first round pick and my 4th round pick and my 7th round pick on the same bye week. Meanwhile, I have my 2nd and my 3rd and my 8th round pick on another bye week. So that's giving me 2 losing weeks. Meanwhile, you could deal with injuries and stuff that could derail you. But you're pretty much signing a death warrant when you end up having 2 different sets of players on multiple bye weeks or on 2 bye weeks. So you just want to avoid that. Outside of that, like, there's been studies done as to like, hey, you should do all your players on one bye week, or you should get all your players spread out. Honestly, I don't think it matters. I think if you lose 1 week because your bye weeks, whatever, but there are injuries, there are other stuff that matters far more the bye weeks that we cannot predict moving forward. So like, dude, don't worry about it. Like, for the most part, just make sure you don't end up with, and I've done it in one of my leagues where I ended up with 3 players on one bye week and 3 players on the other, and they were all top 10 or top 8 picks, I think. So that ended up losing me 2 big weeks. Then my quarterback was out. The guy that I ended up trying to stream didn't work in another bye week. So yeah, be careful with stacking players. Be careful with, especially divisional stacks, I think is a big one. Where your divisional stacks, where you try to counterbalance your lineups, can end up completely destroying your opportunities, especially if you have one injury or 2. Just be careful of that. Outside of that, like, who cares about bye weeks? I mean, it's just 1 week a year.
Yeah. No, I think that's probably the perfect answer is just don't either go all in or spread it out. Don't screw yourself twice. I mean, that's more or less.
Try to beat that, Bob. I'm just kidding.
Got it. Here's my answer. Don't care. Never will. Haven't worried about it, because guess what? The other teams all have bye weeks too. So if you got some top players out week 12, 14, guess what? Probably the team you're playing has them out. And if they don't, okay, it happens. But there's going to be weeks that you win because they have bye weeks. I never worry about bye weeks. I don't care. I don't even look at it. The only time I think I look at it is in super flex leagues, where I got to make sure I got 2 quarterbacks always playing every week. So I get my 3rd quarterback, make sure that they don't have the same. That's the only time I work, I think.
Or in the Scott Fish Bowl. Just saying, because this year's wild with the scheduling.
Right. Catfish Bowl is just, it's just crazy in the first place. So
God, only 11 regular.
I just go in and draft the best players and hope it works out, because it's just hard.
Only
to think
11
through.
regular season games though. So 12, 13, 14 are all full bye weeks for that. That's crazy.
Right, and there's some good teams off those weeks too.
I know. It's
like Green Bay, Kansas City.
I was looking at it. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to give me an energy.
That one's unique. It's always unique. I mean, crazy stats and wild setups, and so that one's just you can't do a podcast on that. You just kind of hope and pray that it all works out for you.
And if you guys don't know what the Scott Fish Bowl is, it's the biggest tournament for fantasy football. It's also the biggest charity drive. I think they raised over $75,000 last year.
Maybe I thought they went over 100, but
it might have been over 100 by the time it was
across
said and
the
done.
nation. I think that various people do various things. Yeah.
I think it was the Podathon that raised $75,000.
Right, as I say, I thought that. Yeah, right, yeah.
Sorry,
maybe it was a lot.
It was an immense amount of money, but they give it to Toys for Tots amongst many other charities. Right. So make sure you go check out #SFB12 on Twitter. We got a little bit working over there on TrophySmack on Instagram, as well as Facebook. Go check it out, the Scott Fish Bowl. If you guys search what is the Scott Fish Bowl, we actually just had an article written by Nate Polvolt recently, and he explains what the Scott Fish Bowl is, as long with explaining what it meant to him as well. So go check that out.
This year with the live locations, I know you're going. Well, I'm doing one in Canton. We're going to be overlooking the Tom Benson Stadium for our draft, so that's going to be fun. And
that's sick.
The Hall of Fame Village, and I know TrophySmack is going to. I want to go to TrophySmack. I don't even go to my own. It's going to be so. I know, Matt. It's going to be so badass. It's going to make everybody sick. It really is. I don't even want to try to compete with that.
I pitched to Matt. Matt's like, we might not even be moved in by then to the new office. And I'm like, dude, we have to do it. He's like, all right, fine, I'll do it. I'll
just rent out SoFi.
I know
that
would be incredible.
He probably would run out so fine.
Love it. Love it. All right, guys. I think we can leave it there. Of course, Bob, what do you got coming out next? What are the next big steps in your world?
Of course, as I said here, everybody buy your fantasy football consistency guide on Amazon.com.
Yeah, link should be in the YouTube and Facebook. Sorry, but descriptions as well. So I did throw that in there.
Perfect. Follow me on Twitter at Bob_Lung. And of course, as Chase said, you guys will be there. Please do not miss the Fantasy Football Expo. And the website to get your tickets is thefantasyfootballexpo.com. Follow on Twitter at the FF Expo. That'll give you up-to-date information. Like Chase said, it's going to be a wild one this year. We got 2 parties, Friday and Saturday night. Friday night's party's got a cornhole tournament. There's only 10 spots left for that. Saturday night flag football tournament inside the dome at the Football Hall of Fame Village, and a quarterback skills challenge for charity inside the party. So
awesome.
Don't miss it. Expo then all day Sunday. Learn so much. There's so many new topics this year. We added everything you can think of. We added auction, DFS, sports betting, all the stuff we didn't get to last year, completely blowing that wide open. We got 4 different rooms going at the same time for the panel discussions, but we're recording every one of them, and everybody who goes will be able to have access to the videos after the fact, so that if you missed one because you wanted to go here versus there, don't worry about it. You can watch them after the fact. So don't miss this. It's a great time.
Yeah, might have it even happen. We might even have a little open bar over there at the TrophySmack place.
We'll be making the drinks there, chat, and using that background of yours, Chase.
Yeah, I actually will be making some cocktails. I'm very excited to be doing that. So I had Matt reach out to you. He said we were good to go, right? We good to go?
Sure.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go.
It's very exciling.
I'm sure that as long as you don't sell it, I think you're fine. But
yeah, that's
keep it on the down low. We'll be kind of hidden in the lower level of this place. Nobody really gets it.
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, perfect segue, Chase. What's big in your world as well coming up?
God, trophies are big, man. You see this trophy?
That is a very big thing immediately in your world.
It's massive.
Yeah, so we got an estimate. What'd you say? 10 pounds in the belt. What are we looking at here?
I can't even do one bench press of this. I can't. It's too heavy.
All right, so what's your bench max? We'll figure it out.
Like 50 pounds right there.
350. 50 pounds. No, these things are awesome, man. These trophies are sick. Like, they're legit. I did a post earlier of Rob Gronkowski doing the Gronk spike. And somebody's like, oh, he'd probably destroy that. And I'm like, I actually don't know if he'd be able to destroy that with a Gronk spike. I know he dented the Lombardi, but I don't think he'd be able to break one of these trophies because they're so heavy duty. But, you have the trophies over there. You got the belts, right? But you can actually customize these, like get rid of all this and then put your own image in there, which was great for Father's Day. Great for pretty much any occasion. We actually had mothers that were reaching out for it for Mother's Day. That was fun.
There you go.
Yeah, it was really cool because you had all these sweet pictures of dads throwing their kids up and catching their kids, and then you had moms in the kitchen mad, and those were the belts that they were getting. It was so funny, man. It was so funny. But no, you guys can go check it out over there, TrophySmack.com. Once again, that's TrophySmack.com. We have a bunch of new products coming out. We're experimenting with a wheel, like a punishment wheel, essentially, right now. We have
awesome.
A dunce cap that I think we're rolling out. We have a champ chain that's rolling out where it goes over your neck. Oh, it's crazy, man. It's really cool to see it expanding. Make sure you guys go check us out for some little bit of fantasy football advice, but more so some smack talk. Recently, we released some articles based off the best foods to bring to your live drafts, the best locations to do for your live drafts, and we're gonna have some Scott Fishbowl advice as to where your strategy should lie, and also who you should reach out to for the most helpful people. We will be coming out with Fantasy Football Expo stuff as well, as to who you should go to at the Fantasy Football Expo, who you should talk to. Hopefully we'll be able to collab with Bob and talk about some of the events. And
put that on TrophySmack is making the awards for all 3 of those events that I mentioned.
Dude, I'm stoked for cornhole. I'm really, really stoked for flag football, but I didn't even know there was a quarterback challenge, man. I'm getting
we have. I mean, it's been kind of announced, but so 3 stations, throwing at targets, throwing in deep to buckets. throwing it like blow up wide receivers with their hands up together thing. It's going to be a blast, and we're going to do it for charity. Haven't got the charity. If all else fails, Fantasy Cares, but I'm trying to work on some different angles to maybe do something a little bit different, maybe local or something like that. So.
Awesome. There's a lot of different stuff going on, man. So I'm just excited to be a part of the fantasy football community. Thank you guys for having me on, by the way.
Yeah,
this has been awesome.
Right.
Sorry, Chris. I feel like,
Poor Chris, yeah.
It's all great.
He got a bad draw tonight going against you and I.
We get enough Chris on most weeks, so all good. All good.
Yes.
Speaking of Chris, where are we gonna find you upcoming on a Belly Up MDFF show?
Well, first, I just want to say, thank you very much for Bob and Chase coming on. I really appreciate you guys, and I'm really looking forward to the expo. Bob, I've only been to Canton twice. I got to go to the Hall of Fame twice to see people get inducted. But you talk about the town; it's a very welcoming town. It's not just could be, people kind of bringing a welcoming atmosphere to a welcoming town. I think that's just a match made in heaven. So I love what you're doing there, and I'm excited. As for MDs, yes, we're having a guest that you guys might have heard of. His name is Adam. He might be a co-guest of mine, or co-host of mine here. So Adam will be joining us this Thursday night at 10 o'clock on MD's Fantasy Football Show, and we'll be continuing doing our team profiles. We'll be covering the AFC South. We're bringing Adam as our designated Colts Homer fan. But no, I think Adam will bring his great advice into our show, and we're really excited to continue to break down the team profiles for you guys.
Yeah, excited. Definitely excited. Get a day break and get right back into talking some fantasy on the air with you guys.
I want to bring Chase's. When I come into the expo, I want to have one of those, like two of those things on my shoulders as I'm walking in. I think that
did you see the video with Matt?
With it.
With the owner, Matt Walsh, he was walking with 16 of them. He had 8 on each
nice.
shoulder.
Very nice.
That's like a workout.
Bad. He was sweating so bad afterwards. He's like, my shoulders hurt for 2 weeks after putting those belts on my shoulders. But he had to bring them for the King's Classic.
There you go.
I'll be training with Bob and trying to get ready for all these challenges. I'm excited for the Expo challenges as well.
Right.
Yeah. Bob and I were talking before the show. I didn't realize there was cornhole. I just signed up.
You just signed up. Yeah.
I'm very excited.
Only about 10 to 12 spots left.
That's about the only thing that Indiana has to offer is some cornhole talent. So
that's all we have time to do.
Exactly.
We're all out of shape. We can't do flag football. At least I am.
Me too.
How many teams are signed up for, or have you done sign ups for flag yet?
Flag and quarterback skill challenge will be coming out in the next week or so. We're kind of doing it so that people can get signed up, get it full, go to the next one. So we'll be coming out with that. We'll just a quick. It's going to be 8 player teams, 5-on-5. It's kind of a mini tourney. So Team A will go first from the 35-yard line. They have 4 plays to either get as many yards or score a touchdown. Then as soon as they're done with their 4 plays or they score, then the Team B takes over 35-yard line. And they've got to beat whatever Team A does. So if Team A scored in 2 plays, they got to score in 1 play. If they score in 2, it's a tie. Then we have a 1-play tie. So that's how we're going to do it. We're going to have real refs. I've hired 4 local refs that done high school games for 20 years. So they will be there in full uniforms. So we're going to have all kinds of little special rules to kind of keep it safe, but keep it fun. But that'll all be coming out here in the next week or so.
I'm bringing my cleats.
It's fine. It's on AstroTurf. I mean, I don't know how well that does on AstroTurf, but no steel spikes. I know.
No, I don't think steel spikes.
Gouging anybody here.
Anyway. All right, guys. My last little thing to plug is the Belly Up Bowl. We're doing the 3rd annual, again with Alex's Lemonade Stand. So 2nd straight year with Alex's Lemonade Stand, 3rd overall. So go ahead, go to bellyupfantasysports.com, sign up for that. It'll be super fun. It'll be on Sleeper. Best Ball League should be super fun. We have had so far over 2,400 of donations to St. Jude's and Alex's Lemonade Stand through the Belly Up Bowl. So super excited to have that for a 3rd year. Make sure again that you go sign up.
If I can offer up some free consistency guides, PDFs to give away to entice people to sign up, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to
You should send them
Absolutely.
one page, Bob. Just send them one page, so that way they have to buy the whole thing.
No.
You will get a random page of the consistency guide, just a random one. I'm going to break one manual. You get 20 manuals and give away.
You're going to mail them in an envelope.
We're getting a timed PDF. You have 24 hours to read it. Good luck.
It will explode
after this message. Sorry about the viruses. It gives to you after it explodes. My bad.
My bad. All right, guys. Thank you guys so much for
Thanks
coming on.
very
Thanks
much.
everyone for watching. We appreciate you. Cheers.